Well, today our session is on structures and systems innovations for health and wellness. Let me introduce our panels, and we'll take the turn to introduce ourselves to you after you have so graciously introduced yourself to us. As we go around the table here, I'll start off with myself. Again, my name is Brandon Savage. I am an instructor at Kansas State University. I teach in the business school there, teach topics such as operations, supply chain, project management. I also work for a software company called Vozic that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to reduce customer churn for recurring revenue consumer-facing businesses. If that's of any interest to you, let me know. But not really relevant to the topic at hand. I am not an expert in the builder space, but I'm good at getting people to talk, and so that's what my role is going to be here. The one exception to that is I am on the board of directors for our local affiliate for Habitat for Humanity. And our particular affiliate a year ago received an award for Best Innovation and Design internationally for some of the builds that we're doing there that feature a lot of the different technology that we're talking about here: small, affordable workforce housing, net zero design. To introduce our panelists today for health and wellness, we'll start off with Aaron.
Hi, Aaron Gutin. I don't normally have.
We got some nice reverb going, but we'll get it tuned in.
I work for Savant Systems. We're a home automation system manufacturer that's deeply invested in wellness and energy management, and it's not our first time sponsoring. It's really nice to be back.
And next up, Joseph.
Joseph Hillenmeyer. I'm the product manager for ventilation and zoning with AprilAire. We make indoor air quality solutions. A number of them, we'll go over some of those in the presentation later. Been with the company almost 10 years now, mostly in the builder space, although we do work on the service and replacement side as well. And we've been coming to Tech Home for 6 or 7 years now, so happy to be back.
Wonderful. And Dennis.
I'm Dennis Webb, Vice President of Operations for Fulton Homes. We are here in Phoenix. I've been with them 28 years. I'm trying it to see if I like it, and then I'll make a decision maybe later on. I'm VP of Operations, so I cover energy and sales and marketing and design. And so my role is a little different. I'm kind of a sales type guy, but I think the sales role in construction is paramount. And so I was kind of instrumental in leading our company to building more energy efficient homes. And we started off with Energy Star, and then we went to Indoor Air Plus and Water Sense, and now we're doing zero energy ready homes. So it's been pretty fun.
We'll hear from both Dennis and Aaron on the later panel as well. But as you can see from these photos, Fulton leans into their positioning in terms of wealth and wellness and health and wellness and
wealth and wellness.
Yes. Well, you are in Arizona, so. All right. So to start off, health and wellness. We know that COVID-19 and the pandemic really changed the public perception of what does health and wellness mean, particularly when it comes to air and circulation and ventilation and filtration. So kind of a two-part question, this is really open to anyone on the panel, is what did you see the biggest shift as we emerged from the pandemic? And then now, here we are almost 3 years later, what has persisted? What is still stuck around, or what has continued to evolve today? Who wants to go first?
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Health. When COVID started, we had already been advertising healthy homes. That's it's a big deal for us. And then we got a bunch of people together, and I was president of the EBA group, Energy and Environmental Building Alliance. We have about 500 builders that come together, and we all kind of talk about energy efficiency and health and things like that. And as a group, we decided that healthy homes was way more important than high-performance homes. Although a high-performance home and energy efficiency is super important, health is way more important, and it resonates with customers better. And so you're talking about emotional things, and you're talking about ways of living and things like that. And if you can bottle that, and you can kind of convince people that you're going to live in a healthier home, why would they want to live in an unhealthy home? So we just kind of look at it as it's another feature, but it's a very, very important feature. And COVID really emphasized that. So we kept advertising during COVID, and we told if you buy a Fulton home, you won't get COVID. We didn't, but we thought about it. But it was very effective.
Thoughts from either of you?
Yeah, I would say along the same lines that you talked about, people saying, well, I wouldn't want an unhealthy home if a healthy home was offered. I think COVID brought so much of that to the forefront that you couldn't just allow consumers to assume they were in a healthy home. They were asking those questions for the first time ever. The homeowner maybe started to understand what MERV 13 meant, MERV 11 meant. They knew that there were different types of filtration that were available in their homes. They started to understand ventilation better. I used to say, anytime I used the word ventilator, people were thinking, well, certainly during COVID, ventilator was associated with something that was happening in a hospital.
Right.
But that product in and of itself gained a lot more understanding from homeowners in regards to how they're managing their indoor air by utilizing the outdoor air. And so I think as it related to the builders and also our HVAC trade, they had to be more prepared than ever before to speak to why they were doing what they were doing, or unfortunately maybe why they weren't doing it. So it brought consumer awareness that we've never seen in the 75 years we've been making indoor air quality.
And it feels like that has continued. That
It has,
Even
yeah.
to
I mean,
today, with the pandemic
yeah.
kind of in the rearview mirror, that people still are asking those questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to forget stuff that you read about in the news every day for 2 years. So that part of it has stuck around for sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I would say like air, for us, circadian lighting has, I'm not going to call it a revolution, but I think, as people were working from home more, whereas we didn't used to think about the lighting in our home office because maybe we worked there on a Friday afternoon or a Sunday morning, and then we went back to the office or our daily work, a lot of our customers started inquiring about our daylight mode and tunable lighting so that during the day they weren't sort of stuck under yellow lights. There's a ton of science that has shown that depending on the color and the temperature of light that we're exposed to, our body will either make or suppress certain like melatonin, right? So if you spend a bunch of time just after lunch in a room with just a normal yellow light, your body literally thinks the sun is setting and you start to get tired. But if you're working in a room with white, bright light, 6,000 Kelvin, kind of like you'd get from the sun, your body does not start making melatonin. And it's totally, obviously, involuntary. It's been kind of cooked into the firmware in our bodies here. So for us, whether it was an entry-level, $30 GE lighting bulb that they could stick in their office, or it was, I want to redo all the lighting in the house, it's certainly picked up during COVID and has definitely stuck around for sure.
By show of hands here in the audience, how many of you have some element of circadian lighting in your own home that you've played around with it?
And I didn't say this, but that's a fancy way to say the lights turn on warm and yellow in the morning. They get cool and crisp by noon when the sun's at its highest point, and then they slowly progress back to that warm yellow by the time the sun sets, effectively mirroring the behavior of the sun, which our bodies obviously react to.
And some vendors will then have also dim a little bit as well, correct?
Yeah, it includes intensity and temperature by time of day. Now, our customer can personalize this. I personalize mine because the light in our room, one of our rooms, is indirect, and so it's not as intense from outside, and I kind of wanted it to match. But for sure, it can be tailored to that room or the house.
So I'll share my little testimony of this. It was about a year ago on Amazon Prime Day, and there was a really screaming deal for some vendor that just had circadian Wi-Fi bulbs, and I think I bought 6 or 8 of them. I'm like, oh, I'll try these out. And it also had all the LED functions, so you can control it from anywhere. Put those into our bedroom. Really noticed a difference when it came to, especially at the end of the day, winding down and being able to go to sleep sooner. And also, as you said, kind of the ramp up at the beginning of the day, to the point where after a few months I said, this is working on me. I've got a bunch of teenagers in my house, teenage boys who like to stay up really, really late. I'm like, I need to put these light bulbs in other places of the house so they feel that as well. Because they're always turning the lights on full blast and they're going to be up till past midnight. And I've already seen, since I've changed that they're getting to bed sooner, that they feel whole house just kind of was winding down, and you can tell that their bodies react to it. So if that's something you haven't experienced with, I'd challenge you to go buy a few bulbs, talk to some of the vendors here, see what you can do as kind of a pilot, just to see it for yourself, and then see how you might be able to incorporate that into some of your homes. Okay, moving on, let's talk about air quality. And we're going to go to our resident expert here in Joseph. What key indoor air quality issues do builders need to address, particularly as so many of them are creating more tightly built homes? And how do technologies like ventilation and filtration help?
So I would say that ventilation is the one that's been probably driven the most by code and taken into account into a tight home. We're certainly well aware that when you tighten up a home, you need to bring indoor air in to replace that. And then if you're trying to maintain energy efficiency, the things we used to do to bring in fresh air, like just opening a window or opening a door, are not the way that you want to do that. We want to do it in a controlled way, in a calculated way. We want to know where that air is coming from, and because of the code requirements, there's a certain amount of it that we need to bring in, whether we're doing it continuously or intermittently. So ventilation technology has allowed us to, instead of forcing the homeowner to recognize when the house needs an air change, we'll just say we'll bring in air, maybe 15 minutes of every hour by opening up this damper in a house and bringing that air in. Now, there's all sorts of different ways to do that from an application standpoint. But really from the consumer standpoint, I think it's just important to explain that bringing outdoor air inside is important, and we can do it without impacting the efficiency of their home, and we can even do it while improving health. And then the exact specific solution that does that is really kind of up to the builder and their trade. And then again, also, what they obviously need to do via their rater to close the home. But definitely one of the most important components is going to be ventilated air in a tight home. But filtration is definitely a close second to that.
And can I interrupt before we get to filtration? So for the ventilation, you talked about how the energy efficiency can still be there. So I live in Kansas. We're getting to winter now where it's going to be like 20 degrees outside. How do you bring in that fresh, cold 20-degree air and not lose all the efficiency and the temperature? What's the technology behind that?
So there's a couple different ways we manage that. One is with an HRV or an ERV, which is a balanced solution, which has a core in it that will take some of that conditioned air and run it through that outdoor air. And it almost kind of sounds like magic, but whatever you want to preserve, whether it's heat and dryness it's going to switch whatever is the conditions in the home so that you're maintaining some of that conditioned air. So anytime you bring outdoor air into the home, you would have to recondition that, because in the winter it's probably going to be cold and dry, and in the summer it's probably going to be hot and humid. So an ERV can manage that humidity and that temperature, and HRV will only manage the temperature side of that. So if you're in a drier climate where humidity is not as much of an issue, an HRV is sometimes the better solution, or in a much colder climate. There's a lot of caveats to that too that we won't get into here, but stop by the booth if you want to know more about ERV versus HRV.
And by show of hands, how many of you are having HRVs or ERVs by default in your homes? Okay, how many offered as an option? Okay, so there's definitely some opportunity there to understand that better.
And that's one way of doing it. There's also just other solutions are locking out maybe during hot times of the day. So now, as we have more sensors in the home, and certainly more intelligent mechanical HVAC products than we've ever had before, we're able to put them on a schedule that can monitor some of that air as it's bringing it in and recognize that, hey, maybe now's not the best time to bring air into the house. And that's still doing it under the code requirements to bring in a certain amount of air per hour. I personally think ideally in my own home, I would want a more fully demand-based ventilation system where you're bringing the air in when you need it most, when the house is experiencing something. In a completely vacant house, you don't necessarily need to ventilate when there's nobody in the home. But
in my experience as an instructor, during COVID, we shut down the university. And after the first semester of being online, fall of 2020, we started letting students back into the classrooms at half capacity. So I had classrooms with about 48 students, only 24 could come in at a time. It was kind of during that period that, as I was educating myself about what does ventilation mean and how does that apply to airborne transmission, I got one of those little carbon dioxide sensors. So I could see what the carbon dioxide parts per million, is that what it is, in the room. And although carbon dioxide is not something that's going to be deadly at the small amounts, it's a good proxy for being able to know how much fresh air is being circulated into the room. And it was really interesting to start taking that around with me to different places and to see the difference in different places. And at our school, there were some classrooms that were not very good, even at 24 students, let alone later on when we started getting 48 students. And the building, although a relatively new building, it was built like 6 years ago, really wasn't bringing in fresh air on a regular basis. And when you had 48 people packed into a room with the doors closed, the carbon dioxide was spiking in there, which meant that if someone in that room had a respiratory disease, you were rebreathing their air. I started seeing that at church, other places where you had a lot of people in a single room, and then noticed that in certain bedrooms in my house. It was the same thing. If we were all watching TV together in a room, those levels started creeping up quite a bit. And as I started, and for all of you, probably the most recent experience many of you might have had with this is planes are really bad for this. And so for me, I still kind of pick and choose times where I might wear a mask. One of them is on a plane, because I don't get sick when I wear my mask on the plane like I used to. Those of you that travel a lot, at least pre-COVID, it was like 50% chance anytime I was on a plane I was going to get sick later, and now I know why. It's because there wasn't that circulation of fresh air.
Yeah, and I think kind of to a point earlier, second to COVID would be the proliferation of tabletop air measurement devices has helped us a lot too. Not even ones that we sell or make, but just the fact that they're out there now, people are aware of a problem. The next thing they need to do is how to fix it. And sometimes there's often been a disconnect there of, for a while they didn't know they had it, so they didn't know they needed to fix it. Now they know they have a problem, but they're not entirely sure what they need to do about it. So again, ventilation is one of those solutions, and air filtration is another, in that the dust and things that you're bringing into the home don't just leave the home, especially in a tight home. They're going to stay in there. Ventilation is going to help with some of those things, but more of the particulate matter, allergens, things like that, some of those can even come from the outside. So ventilation could make those worse, having an air filter that can trap pollens and wildfire smoke when that's going on. That was a big question we had over the past couple of years from customers was, I might want to turn my ventilation down and have a better filter in during some of these wildfire seasons to fight some of that. So those would certainly be my two most recommended products in a new home. And then of course, humidity control, and that differs depending on the region that you build in and some of the other systems in your home.
And so Aaron, how does smart home technology kind of weave into this?
Well, that are actually powered, not just the shade. Why? Because maybe they're letting some fresh air in, and that's how they're offsetting their costs. So there's a bunch of ways that customers are starting to utilize this. From filtered air or the health and wellness, we're starting to see that invade corporate environments a lot. So, Fortune 100 companies are spending a lot of money ensuring that if they're bringing people back to the office, there's this element of health and wellness. And of course, just like other things, when we experience at work, it starts coming home with us. Wi-Fi is probably the best example. Sure. We all started using Wi-Fi at work 25 plus years ago, and now you can't be home without it effectively. So I think the two are intrinsically intertwined and codependent, and as new air filtration systems come to market, they're going to be more automatable, and companies like ours are going to take advantage of that and build it into our platform.
So Dennis, taking this technology, how is Fulton Homes leveraging air quality technology to meet standards, but to sell homes and impact customer satisfaction?
So we started doing Indoor Air Plus 10 years ago. We were one of the first larger builders to build it. We've won the Indoor Air Plus Leader Award 9 years in a row. We're quite proud of that. We're leaders in the Indoor Air Plus arena. If you're doing Energy Star homes right now, and you're not doing Indoor Air Plus, the step to move to Indoor Air Plus is very small. The biggest thing we had to do was make sure that we had low VOCs and we had adhesives that were not killing people. We had to do some caulking of top plates and things like that. We had to bring in AprilAire's ventilation system, and we've been using that for 10 years. It's been a great partnership, and that's one of the most important things. But with that, with winning the Indoor Air Plus Leader Award, we've also won the Indoor Air Plus Leader of the Year Awards. We're the only builder in the country. We've won that 3 times. It's been given out 6. So we're quite proud of that. Obviously, we market that tremendously. We do radio, TV advertising, signage, everywhere.
I was going to say, even on your, it's kind of hard to see, but on these vents You actually
yeah,
have that
that's-
award
that's
logo
a-
on those.
Yeah, that's another thing we do. So one of the requirements of Indoor Air Plus is you have to seal the vents in your air conditioning system. They don't want construction debris getting in there during the construction of the house. So we just seal that. And so we come up with the idea to brand it and have a co-branding that says Indoor Air Plus Fulton Homes. And the salespeople use that as a demonstration. It's very effective to say, hey, this is Indoor Air Plus, and let me show you why. Do you go to other houses, do you see this? So we're selling against the other people. I guess the thing that shocks me the most is why so few builders don't go that step and build Indoor Air Plus homes. It's free. You don't pay anything for it. The only thing you pay for is the caulking, which you're going to do anyway. Make sure you have great products, and you have your ERV or HRV or whatever system you want to use, and it's not that expensive, and
for
it
the,
sells a lot of houses.
yeah, and for the last bullet point here, the third-party verification of indoor air quality. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have a company that comes in and they inspect every house now and to make sure that all these things have been done. So they check every house. If you're not doing Indoor Air Plus or Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready, you're not getting those checks. And they're certified raters that are all over the country. And it's an industry that is huge right now, and it's only going to get bigger.
So having the certification obviously is something that you're able to advertise, which you do very well, and it appears that helps you to sell more homes.
Yep.
What are the success stories that actual clients are telling to you down the road that ties into what you believe Air Plus is going to deliver?
I think if builders, when buyers are looking for a house, they want to eliminate builders. That's what they want to do. They want to say, okay, there's too many builders. I want to get it down to 4 or 5. So they get on the internet and they whether it's Realtor.com or New Home Source or Zillow or any of the sites or the individual websites that builders have, they figure out what to do and say, okay, I'm going to look at this, or I'm going to look at these 4 builders. And then they go around to each builder. Well, if you have a kid that has asthma or something like that, and you're building a healthy home and the guy next door to you is not, you're going to have a tremendous advantage over selling that house to that buyer over the guy that doesn't really care about it. Plus you have a certain emotional tie and a quality tie where you're being part of the community. Part of our thing is we give away a lot of money to charities, and we're very philanthropic. Ira Fulton is the largest donor in Arizona. It's pretty cool. So we tie all that stuff together, and we're able to really make an impact on our marketing.
Gotcha. All right, moving on to, oh, yes, question, thank you.
Page you just left, you start looking at, I'm for it.
Yeah.
And before you answer, I'm supposed to repeat all the questions, so let me take a stab at this. The question was, particularly with reduced levels of moisture and contaminants, the question was asked by someone who's in the Houston area, and that's a big concern there because of a lot of the commercial operations there and particulates that are in the air. The question was, how much do you have to do that, and what is kind of the ROI in terms of what you have to spend to reduce those levels of moisture and contaminants versus the benefits you see? Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
So you're really looking at kind of 2 different things here. As far as the low VOCs and all those have to do with what we put in the house. So it would be paint and carpet and flooring and draperies and things like that, things that we place into the house. We can control all of that. What we can't control is outdoor air quality. But the EPA has said, well, if you do these things and you have a certain ventilation, you have a certain air exchange per hour, and you have insulation that the home is very tight, you're going to be able to keep that outside air out, and particularly when putting fresh air in, you're going to have a better quality of air. The thing is, people spend 90% of their time indoors. And it's more important than that they have quality air inside their house than it is outside, because they're spending way more time there.
So I assume probably more than half the people in here totally understand this concept, but I know I may not be that in depth. I know there's maybe a few people, so I'm going to ask a kind of a dumb question. If I've been building the house the same way I have for 20 years, like what is VOC paints? Like what difference does that make inside the house? Why would I need to change that? What is VOC?
So it's volatile organic compound, and it's just stuff that's it's not good for you. When you breathe those things, it's not good, it's not healthy, and you could have breathing difficulties.
Even years after the house has been installed, because it still continues to...
Correct.
And it's more severe in a newer home because of that air tightness. Less of that's going to escape naturally on its own. And even when we're using better products maybe than we would have used years ago, when you're buying an existing home that's a lived-in home, there are sometimes some benefits to a lived-in home, and then that's one of them. Depending on what renovations they've done on their own, some of that off-gassing has already occurred. So those VOCs could come from paint, but then what the homeowners themselves bring in. I mean, maybe you use a no VOC paint, but they bring in cheap furniture that's covered with the stuff. How do you deal with that after they've taken ownership of the home to make sure that it stays healthy after that?
We're also looking at things like making sure that Energy Star and Indoor Air Plus are on MLS. And so when you list your house, you can list it as a Indoor Air Plus house, and it's going to give a higher value than something that doesn't. And it should be a higher value because the home is more valuable.
Now I'm going to veer a little bit off script. I tend to do this, so I'll warn all my other panelists as well. But one thing just popped into my mind. This ties a little bit into tomorrow's afternoon topic of energy efficiency. There's this big trend of electrification within homes. One of those is that we are seeing certain parts of certain states mandates to remove natural gas appliances and to switch to electrification. How does that play into this? Are there studies that show that not having an active fire burning and heating up your heater or your stove, how that impacts air quality?
So here's the latest, and
Yes.
we study this very carefully.
This is a polarizing topic. I know there's some
Oh, yeah,
people,
I
it's
know.
like, this is I want to be able to grill my food.
Yeah. So most people do not use their fan over their cooktop. Okay? That's incredible. And they're saying, well, there's a problem because you have gas and you're cooking and you're doing these things. But if you don't use the you don't use the air fan, it's crazy. It contradicts everything that's going on. Our country's not ready for an all-electric grid. It won't work. People will die. It just won't work right now. It will eventually, okay, but not now. There are certain things that gas is way more energy efficient than electricity, like drying clothes. So we are kind of advocates of letting the buyer choose, and there's certain things that we're going to a lot of electric heating in some cases, but heating in Phoenix is 2 weeks out of the year, so I don't worry too much about that, or electric heat or water pumps and heat pumps, and so we don't really worry too much about that because in the summertime you turn on the cold water and it's hot, So we're a little different. You'll see as you stay here a couple days, but it's a little different here. But I think this whole thing of electrification is a little scary when the government's going to tell people how they should live.
I'm going to wade into these waters. So there are 50-year studies that show exactly this. If you're not renewing the air in your kitchen, that gas coming at you is not good. Just like standing over a charcoal barbecue all day outside the football stadium is probably not the best air you can be breathing. But as far as electrification is concerned, it's unfortunate, but we have to regulate that stuff in order for people to change. That if everyone voluntarily did the right thing, we wouldn't need to do it. So I'm not for saying you can't have gas, but I will take issue with the preparedness for electrification. So a plan that completely rebuilt our entire infrastructure is not viable. But really what we're seeing happen in multiple states is there's a variety of different technologies that's allowing customers to either retro in electrification or implement during a new build. So, one, if everyone charged their electric car tonight on the grid, the whole grid would fall apart. But if our homes start having battery storage and or the ability to help us do this, the demand on the grid isn't as bad. So, gas ovens are just one tiny example of regulation, but for sure, there's going to be fierce debate. I'm the son of a chef, so you won't take gas out of my dad's house, but you will. I did convince him to put an induction burner, like a tabletop induction burner next to the oven, so that he could get comfortable with the idea that his stainless steel pots will just get hotter faster and do the same thing with induction. So, I think it's a balancing act. Your entire neighborhood can't just decide to all put in electric ovens because we're going to have a problem. But for sure, we've got to nudge everybody in those small directions to make an impact.
So what we do is we offer gas and electric at every hookup.
Right.
So it's up to the buyer what they want. And eventually, it is up to the buyer.
Exactly.
It shouldn't be up to some city. Santa Monica shouldn't regulate how our people live.
My mom and stepdad live in Southern California, and they're early adopters of green technology. They've had solar panels for like 25 years. They recently switched over their stove to an induction, and I was there over the summer. And my experience with electric stoves has always been, it takes forever.
Yeah.
And my stepdad put a cast iron pot on the thing and flipped a switch, and then turned around, got some bacon out of the fridge, and laid it down. And so it had only been like 10 seconds, and it was like sizzling, and I just whipped my head around like, what just happened? Like, how did your cast iron get that hot for electric? And the technology is definitely evolving fast in terms of speed to cooking.
Yeah, again, the gas thing aside, we are able to do more with power supplies, with newer approach to build. And so, the induction ovens of today are not the induction ovens of 10, 15 years ago. They're really fast and efficient.
All right, so we went a little bit off script, but thanks for indulging me there. So
I do want to add one thing real
yes,
quick
please
to that.
do. And is there anything you wanted to add on this slide either? Look at that.
I actually can't see it from down here.
You can't see that.
We're fine.
On using that range hood, that is probably one of the most missed examples of ventilation that's been around forever, and it doesn't need to be cut. Make sure it's one that shoots it outside. One that recirculates it is pretty much pointless. You do see those a lot in apartments, but we have an air things in our house, and I know when my wife is cooking, because the PM 2.5 goes up, it's not because she's burning it, it's just anytime you turn a stove on that happens. I'll send her a text if I'm traveling and say, turn the range hood on, you're obviously cooking. So there is an impact of that, but some of that would happen whether you had gas or electric. When there's things on a stove that are being heated up, you're going to have that impact. The other side where we are seeing, I think on the electrification is, I do agree that I don't think every state, group, climate zone is equally prepared to handle electrification. Some places gas is still a very cheap way to heat your house. We're from the Wisconsin area, and I know the trade there in particular just simply does not believe that heat pumps will work in cold climates. Now, they do. There's a lot of solutions out there, but if you've been in the trade for 50 years, your opinion's always been, if I put a heat pump in here, I'm going to be back in 6 weeks selling you some type of auxiliary heat because that wasn't able to keep up. So as that technology gets there, it's important to make sure that the trade and the customers that buy the house are aware that it exists.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yes, please, in the back. So the question was, here in Phoenix, is the indoor quality rater the same as the energy rater who's going to come in and kind of certify your home? Is that the question? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
There's several pretty good rating companies in Phoenix, and they all do both, energy. They all do Energy Star, Indoor Air Plus, as well as Water Sense and Zero Energy Rating.
And so it's probably the case, I know you can't speak for every single state, but probably pretty likely in most states that it'll be the same, or you can find someone who can do both.
I'm familiar with the western states, and in those cases, the raters will cover everything.
and you start asking for raters, then maybe the ones in your area who aren't doing that will consider doing it if they see that you're asking more for it.
10 years ago, Indoor Air Plus didn't exist, so no one was doing it. But as that became more popular, Energy Star has always been huge. And so that's when the rating industry started. But then Indoor Air Plus came along and that WaterSense, and WaterSense is something that we take real seriously. But it's a shame that more builders haven't joined that group. It's so easy to do. Almost everyone has low-flow toilets and faucets that don't waste a lot of water because there's nothing else available out there. Okay, so it's not hard to to say, okay, I got WaterSense fixtures. Well, the big part.
We'll come back to EnergySense or
Okay.
WaterSense on
Okay.
tomorrow. So put a pin in that one.
Okay.
Because I was looking for the slide. I'm like, I know I did a slide for that, and I'm not seeing it because it's in tomorrow's deck. Comfort, though. Let's talk about how this technology can bring comfort to, or enhance the comfort of a home. So I think the first question I've got here is for Dennis. So how have you centered your building practices around comfort to then promote health and wellness in your construction?
You kind of hit it on the head because comfort is like one of the most important things, particularly in a climate like this where we had 100 straight days this summer of 110 plus temperatures. That's not comfortable. And fortunately, we have pretty good air conditioning companies and good air conditioning partners where they take care of that. But our big thing in Phoenix is the air. When it's 120 out, that's hard to cool that house down to 75. It just is. It's just that even though it's tight and everything like that, we try to do the best we can. We use a 16 SEER air conditioner, the highest one available, and we use the AprilAire ventilation system, and we just do everything we can to make that buyer comfortable. And temperature is the main part.
Temperature is the main factor. What are some of the other vectors
Well,
that
of course,
contribute to comfort?
air quality would be one.
Okay.
Although that's not one you'd say, oh God, I have terrible air quality. They can't really tell that.
I think humidity is probably the biggest impact on comfort. We were having lunch outside before this panel, and we kept saying, oh, it's just beautiful out. And then I looked at my phone, it was 87.
Yeah.
I've never been comfortable at 87 degrees in Wisconsin, because if it's 87, the humidity is probably somewhere close to 80 or 90%.
Well, we have humidity here during the monsoon season, which is like July, August, and it rains and for about an hour, and then it's humid, and then it goes away. But pretty much it's a dry heat. But it's 110.
Yeah. So 87 is comfortable. I think there is an understanding by some homeowners of the relationship between humidity and temperature, latent and sensible load of the systems in your home. But I think more than anything else, humidification solution is a feeling is believing type of thing, whether that's adding it in the winter due to dry air in northern climates or removing it in the summer. I will admit there are some parts of the country, and I kind of think this is one of them, where people are just really used to dry air. You technically could humidify a home in Phoenix in the summer. There might be some benefit to that, but people are kind of used to living that way. But certainly, if you go into homes in Houston in particular, or in Florida, if you're able to manage that humidity, the amount that you can set up that thermostat 3 to 4 degrees and still feel comfortable, not only are you more comfortable because it's not a cold, clammy feeling, you're also being more energy efficient because you're using the air conditioner to lower the temperature instead of to lower the temperature and reduce the humidity, which is not something.
And I think there's some too. I mean, we've lived all over the place. We've lived in California. We lived in Utah, very similar to kind of the Arizona climate in the summer. We've lived in Pennsylvania, very humid in the summer, and now Kansas is pretty humid. I know my wife who has asthma, and we've had kids who have the really, really dry skin, is that difference in the humidity does provide a lot of comfort in the summer when it's historically dry. When we come back to see family in Utah over the summer, it's the biggest complaint from my wife and kids. It's too dry, even when you're inside. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think water filtration is something that is important, and from a smart home perspective, we're really the glue or the binder that's taking all these disparate solutions and really tying them into one. And so from our customer's perspective, their circadian lighting being on a schedule that just persists, light turning itself on so you don't come into a dark home coming home from work, or the right temperature at the right time of day. I know in my own home has made a big impact in where I spend time in the morning and how I sort of get my day started. So scheduling and automation are essential parts of living. Whether we all used to try to figure out how to schedule the VCR to record that thing, if anyone here is old enough to remember a VCR. But that we're automating our homes to accommodate our lifestyle. So that's the right amount of humidity at the right moment, or the right light at the right time. And then from an energy perspective, it's all about ensuring that we have energy reserves so that if the grid goes away, we can still power the house and keep all that stuff working and remain comfortable.
And there's a lot more technology out there to have sensors in the home to be able to not only look at temperature, we've had that around for a decade, but now more and so with more humidity sensors in the home, even VOC sensors, CO2 sensors, and able to programmatically change things in the house based on those readings from what are much more relatively affordable sensors.
Yeah, it's still true, unfortunately, that most homes have one sensor for their HVAC system, and usually it's not in a place that gives an accurate reading. And so one of the early things that smart home sort of adopted and has now become more prevalent is this idea of taking multiple readings and then averaging those readings, right? So we all have a room in our house that's a little hotter than others and a room that's a little cooler. So if you're able to read the temperature in the really hot area and the really cool area, you can get an idea of the average temperature in the house. You're making decisions when to heat or cool based on the average temperature rather than just that localized temperature. Because of course, smart builders are going to put that temperature sensor out of direct sunlight so we don't get a false heat reading, but it also works the other way, right? It reads a couple degrees cooler maybe than the average temperature. So all of those things are integrated. For our customer, we want them to sort of set it and forget it. And so whether they're scheduling HVAC in the app or they're combining HVAC with dropping the shades at certain times of day, et cetera, to really minimize the impact of their energy consumption and without sort of sacrificing being comfortable.
Yeah, I've seen that. I'm a tinker and I like to, I guess, buy things from online that I see deals on. And so I've added different temperature sensors in the home. A lot of the, those different gadgets that you can do that will help you, whether it's, Apple, what's the Apple's one? You've got Echo and you've got
there's a bunch
Google
out there.
That a lot of those devices themselves now are having those sensors built into them where they're measuring temperature, humidity, and they can feed that and act as a sensor to other systems to be able to create other rules and triggers.
Even in our GE lighting line, we have a $80 over-the-counter smart thermostat that can talk to up to 6 little Bluetooth sensors. So even if you got to put that thermostat in the sun, you can pair it with one of these sensors that's like the size of a quarter and just stick it on the bedside table out of direct sunlight and then tell the thermostat, no, you're going to use this temperature sensor.
Yeah, you can even ignore the one that's on
and
the...
ignore the one that's in, or average. So I think more and more thermostats are starting to adopt this, and certainly more professional systems like AprilAire and their competitors have had solutions like this. It's just that consumers have either not been sold that solution at the right time, or were just did not buy into the extra cost of those sensors around the house.
Some of those sensors have motion sensors too, so that you can say, people are in these two rooms, these are the ones that, at least for right now, take the average between these two, and whether you've got venting or other things can be able to do that. But
yeah, for sure, we're all going to be talking about presence detection inside the next 2 to 3 years as that becomes more and more reliable and viable. We're going to be able to, we see it in sci-fi movies, right? You walk into a room and the lights turn on, but the room you just walked out of, all the lights shut off on the spaceship. Like, we could totally do that today. Most consumers have not either invested or thought of these types of solutions, but they're ultimately going to play a role in reducing the carbon footprint of where we live and where we work.
one of, I'm the example of like the Frankenstein that I've got the 50 different apps that are controlling my smart home, right? So, boo, I know. But it gives me a chance to kind of see all the things that are out there. One additional lighting thing I just added is experimenting with sensing whether or not you're in the room based on Wi-Fi, because these bulbs have Wi-Fi in them, and you just walking in the room apparently might be able to vary. But it's just interesting the technology that's out there that
Sure.
might be able to give us more information as to presence within the
In
home.
California, you know, Title 23 and now Title 24 have mandated, you know, you got to have an occupancy sensor in a bathroom. You got to have an occupancy sensor in these other spaces. And so there are tons of products, I'm sure, you know, Fulton is working with that integrate, you know, right into a standard dimmer. So for sure, sensors are going to become ever present.
Okay, we're at the 5-minute mark here. Let's see. Anything we want to talk about acoustic? I know we don't have specific, but anything to speak from in terms of trying to regulate, control, augment sound within the home to achieve comfort? I know we were talking anecdotally beforehand. The one builder had a complaint from a customer who said the fans in their bathroom were too quiet. They actually wanted them a little bit louder to give some privacy in the room.
We do a fairly large business in sound, and we actually do a couple things. We do sound insulation in homes. That's for comfort as well. Things like Zoom calls. We have an option for
A home office
home
that's
office
insulated.
which insulates the house or insulates the room. And then it also has all these different switches and different hookup for a home office. We'll do a dual home office, so his and her home office, things like that. So it's just a matter of, you know, changing all that kind of stuff. We do a lot with acoustics. We do surround sounds and things like that. And, you know, we strategically put them in different rooms. We might do a family room surround sound and things like that. And so buyers love that stuff. It's part of
I
that
think it's one of those things that's going to get better as computer modeling gets better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the cost of designing an acoustically perfect or well-suited space is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus times the normal cost. We don't build rooms in the shapes that are friendly for sound, right? You don't want any 90-degree angles technically, because low frequencies get trapped in that corner and then amplified. But you know what's really expensive to build a round room or a room with no 90-degree angles, and so we don't see them very often. But I think computer modeling is going to help builders make smarter decisions on total cubic volume. Sometimes, you know, an inch here or a couple inches in height there can make a profound difference in how that room sounds, echo or no echo, you know, that kind of stuff.
I do wonder, we've got a generation that's rising up that doesn't seem to appreciate that at all. They can have the music playing on a phone like this and they're completely happy that music filling the room.
It's a pendulum though.
Yeah, I'm curious whether
It'll swing back the
it'll
other
swing
way.
back or not.
Yes. And I think that's why we saw a big rise in vinyl. There's the tactile experience of like this big oversized black disc that I've never seen before, but there's also it's not a phone experience that I think is going to become more and more important to those customers, or at least fingers crossed.
Sure. So with 2 minutes left, we can probably have time for 1 or 2 questions. If there's anything else out in the audience about health and wellness and the technologies that support and deliver health and wellness and thereby comfort to the end user. While you're pondering any other questions, any last words?
I'll add just one thing. You know, I've talked a couple times about circadian lighting. This is radically affordable now. There are several options on the market that are like price to a halo lighting fixture or something you might be using in a production home. It's worth considering. You know, little LED puck that replaces the standard single color LED puck, except now this thing has total, you know, WRGB. It's something, you know, that gamer that's starting to buy their first or second house are certainly into, and you know, their kids are really into. So for sure, color is a big deal.
We're looking at speaking of that, we're looking at a whole production thing with halo lighting, and they haven't really come out with a builder type thing yet, so we've been working with them for quite a while, and we'll come out with something probably in the next couple of months. with circadian and things like that. It's really exciting. When you look at how we do lights in a home, it's awful. It's awful. It's the worst thing in the world. We got these stupid tubes that, you know, are brightened down, and they're, you know, now we've switched to LED, big deal. But we have to move our trusses because these things take up all the room, and so we screw up our houses. So now we're just going to go to little flat things and do them in different colors and different shapes and things like that. It'll open up a whole bunch of stuff.
Again, I'll give my endorsement to try out circadian lighting. It really is life-changing. We're at time. Thank you. Will you please join me in a round of applause for our panel discussions? You'll get to